Disastrous press conference just unfolded in the White House. Donald Trump's chief propagandist, Caroline Leavitt, seemed out of breath. She seemed fatigued, and she was really struggling to answer these questions. Here, she laughs at the concept. Watch this.
So the courts are basically telling you guys they think that the White House's policies, the president's policies, are in some way against the law.
Well, these laws have already been granted to the president by the Constitution and by laws that have been previously passed. I'll give you another example. For instance, we've been blocked in court for the revocation of these.
The White House news conference was an attempt to defend the indefensible, but it was doomed from the start. The so-called Maha reports and their preposterous assertions that $4 trillion would somehow not raise the deficit led to a complete meltdown, a truly catastrophic display of dodging accountability. Before we dive deeper, could I ask a small favor? If you appreciate this content, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It might surprise you, but over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you absolutely nothing, yet it profoundly impacts us. Have you hit that subscribe button? Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to the video. From the moment Caroline Leavitt approached the podium, it was evident this wouldn't be a smooth session. She appeared visibly worn out, already battling a relentless onslaught of inquiries from all directions. This was not the day for an individual whose primary role is to project an image of composure and organization. The media wasn't merely posing difficult questions. They sensed weakness, and Leavitt's fumbling attempts at a response only invited further scrutiny.
It is asked by a reporter about some of the breaking news, first reported by a news organization called Notice, that the Trump regime's Maha report, Make America Healthy Again report.
A Notice investigation found that the Hallmark Maha Commission report that was released last week cites studies that appear to not exist. We know that because in part, we reached out to some of the listed authors who said that they didn't write the studies.
We have complete confidence in Secretary Kennedy and his team at HHS. I understand there were some formatting issues with the Maha report that are being addressed, and the report will be updated, but it does not negate the substance of the report.
The commotion began when reporters brought up court decisions that ruled against two of Trump's core policies, the revocation of visas and taxes on certain products. These were also not little procedural matters because the government had overreached itself. The courts had effectively slapped it. But rather than taking the decision seriously, Leavitt laughed. Yes, she laughed, shrugged, and dismissed the worries as if they were a joke. If that was done to defuse the situation, it backfired badly. It only served to draw attention to the administration's lack of a clear strategy for handling the aftermath. Additionally, the media weren't letting her get away with it.
This is the most incompetent and corrupt regime imaginable. I guess fortunately their incompetence exceeds the corruption, but they're basically both very, very bad.
The president says he's not happy with all aspects of it. What changes would he like to see be made? And can this bill be both big and beautiful?
It is a one big, beautiful bill, as the name rings true. The president's ultimate priority is to get this bill back to his desk for signature. And the president's priorities in this bill are non-negotiable in terms of the tax priorities he wants to see and the large tax cuts in the border investments that are currently in this bill.
Is there no strategy in place by the government to deal with these decisions? When one of them questioned him, Leavitt gave the equivalent of verbal spaghetti in response. She muttered that she was waiting for further information and continued. However, the harm had already been done. She was clearly shaken when the topic of Congress's involvement in the dispute was raised. A reporter sharply questioned why Congress hadn't intervened to defend the policies of the administration. Leavitt brushed the topic away with a vague remark about continuing negotiations rather than providing a substantive response. Her lack of answers wasn't the only thing. The reason was that she didn't appear too interested in locating any things I was looking for.
I wanted to just clarify once and for all the Qatari jet, the sale, or the gift, because the Qatari government is asking the U.S. to clarify that the jet's pending transfer was initiated by the Trump administration. So is this something that the White House is going to do?
Caroline Leavitt to clarify. So what's up with this Qatari jet? Is it a gift? Is it a purchase? How do you describe it?
The amount of questions we've received, and we've been incredibly clear, and I have answered this, the president has answered this, the Department of Defense has answered this. This is a government-to-government gift transfer from the Qataris.
Ladies, gentlemen, and anyone who still thinks dismissing legal rulings is just another part of the job, get ready. We are watching what can only be described as the administration's response to court rulings collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. And folks, it wasn't just bad. It was glaringly obvious to everyone watching that this White House doesn't have a plan beyond denial, deflection, and hoping the American public forgets how sentences work by 3 a.m. Because yes, when the courts ruled against Trump's latest round of visa revocations and terror tantrums, they didn't do it on a whim. They did it with clear legal principles so strong that even most middle school civics students could have predicted the outcome. Yet, instead of acknowledging the ruling, adjusting the policy, or at least pretending to respect the Constitution, the administration decided the best move was to double down, to yell louder, and to treat due process like it was optional reading. And boom! Just like that, suddenly the White House looked less like a seat of power, and more like a bunker full of people Googling how to ignore reality while pretending accountability is just another word for liberal bias. The press conference that followed wasn't just awkward, it was damning. It highlighted a broader pattern of disorganization, a lack of coherent strategy, and a leadership style that treats major setbacks like minor inconveniences you fix with Sharpie and a new press release. Dismissing the courts and Congress like they were just inconvenient speed bumps might play well to the base that still claps when he says China. But honey, it's not exactly governance. It's not even politics. It's performance art wrapped in ego. And suddenly, the entire operation looks less like leadership and more like a dumpster fire doused in gasoline, lit on fire, and then set on fire again just to make sure. And trust me, nothing says self-sabotage quite like watching your team respond to legal defeats the same way Trump responds to late-night roasts, with rage, repetition, and the hope that if you scream loud enough, the truth will somehow go away. But here's the kicker. The storm didn't blow over. It got worse. And somewhere deep inside Mar-a-Lago, Trump is probably pacing around muttering fake news at a portrait, wondering why nobody claps when he yells, "I won," into a void that no longer listens.
And claims that the budget bill will not increase the deficit when by its very terms it adds $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. And even if you listen to what the MAGA Republican senators are saying, it will increase the deficit.
The blatantly wrong claim that the one big beautiful bill increases the deficit is based on the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers who use shoddy assumptions and have historically been terrible at forecasting across Democrat and Republican administrations alike. The CBO's latest forecast makes the same anemic growth assumptions as they did in 2017, missing the impact of the one big beautiful bill.
Okay, this is a very substantial section of your script, covering a lot of ground with strong opinions and vivid imagery. I will now rewrite this entire portion, maintaining the established emphatic and descriptive style and strictly adhering to your instructions. No added content, no headings, and no narration from my side. Here's the rewritten script. There was that chuckle after that. Since the chuckle wasn't a fleeting moment, let's take time to discuss it. It established a tone for all subsequent events. Imagine if, rather than reaching for a hose when someone tries to explain why their home is on fire, they just shrug and laugh uncomfortably. That was very much Levitt's appearance at the time. It wasn't comforting, and it wasn't professional either. On the contrary, it demonstrated how unprepared the government was for these problems. Already the press conference was in jeopardy. The problem is that things were going to become worse. A fresh subject that would elevate the presser's trained disaster character to a whole new level. A fake report called the Maha study was offered as reporters persisted in their quest for answers. By the end of the day, people will be talking about more than just Levitt's chuckle, but we'll get into all the ridiculous specifics of that in a moment. What's worse than attempting to defend careless practices and ostensibly a non-existent report? At Caroline Levitt's press conference, things took yet another crazy turn. Then came the MA report, or Make America Healthy Again, as it was officially known. It sounds honorable, doesn't it? However, the skepticism of all the reporters, there was the only thing that looked to be healthy. Instead of serving as the administration's bright spot for health programs, this report was a jumble of fictitious citations and research that never existed. This one did not just sway. If health policy were a house of cards, with the power of a wrecking ball, it fell apart almost immediately. People started asking, who wrote the report? What was the source of the data? The most important question is this even real? Levitt seemed momentarily prepared to take on the storm. She made the bold claim that the Department of Health and Human Services had produced one of the most transformative health reports ever released by the federal government. But like the report itself, it lacked much substance. She delivered her line with unwavering confidence. The reporters didn't believe it. Like a cat with a laser pointer, they jumped on every evasive answer and kept asking her for details. At that point, it was hard to overlook the holes. The inability to locate important sources in the study was the main cause of the uproar. Even worse, depending on your point of view, a number of the claimed studies in the report were really non-existent. This was revealed by an investigative media notice that had previously blown the whistle, revealing that several purported authors named in the paper flatly denied any participation. How could this have passed quality control? Was a question posed by one reporter. Levitt argued that these were just minor formatting flaws being fixed, continuing to hold her talking point like duct tape on a sinking raft. Small formatting errors that are equivalent to claiming that the seatbelt signs malfunction in order to explain an aircraft disaster. However, as worries about artificial intelligence, yes, AI, arose, things either became better or worse. Its answer was a master lesson in evasion when asked whether any of the report had been generated using AI techniques. She dismissed it, blaming HHS directly, and said that she was unable to comment on the report's methodology. She obviously tried to get off the subject, but reporters weren't giving her any leeway. Their displeasure appeared to increase with each unanswered question. Credibility in the administration, which was already in jeopardy due to previous court decisions, fell much more. Instead of applauding, the crowd was laughing and jeering from the same seats. If this was the White House's interpretation of political theater, this irony is almost poetry. The purpose of the Maher report was most likely to divert attention away from the controversy surrounding other government programs by providing a bright diversion. Rather, it turned into a controversy of its own, one that was essentially intended to make everyone wonder who was in charge at this time. Fake research served as a foundation for the Point A Health Initiative. It's hazardous in addition to being humiliating. You have to question what else a government is ready to fabricate when they can't even be trusted to speak the truth about something as fundamental as public health. It's the kind of ineptitude that rapidly loses its humor. Nevertheless, this news conference was not treated with the seriousness it required. Each difficult question caused Levitt's answers to become more disjointed. When the basic data for their study was a total fabrication, one journalist questioned frankly how the government intended to maintain confidence. Her response, which consisted of a series of ambiguously comforting words about her commitment to revolutionary policies and openness, didn't really address anything. Although, to be fair, no one would have accused Levitt of nailing the landing. She may have won a bronze medal if verbal gymnastics had been an Olympic event. Her quotation started to resemble a word salad with additional dressing, which kept the time flowing, but eventually left everyone feeling let down. Then there's the inevitable lesson from all of this. Using phony research and shoddy data to support a position has a high price. The anger in this instance wasn't limited to stenographers and legislators. The public was given a unique opportunity to see behind the scenes, and the results were unsettling. It's possible that the White House anticipated this health report would improve their reputation as proactive and solution-focused. Not only have they mishandled the ball, but they have now generously given it to their detractors. Supporting contentious policies is one thing. Building such fortifications with false scaffolding is another matter. After the press conference, the notice continued to highlight the administration's mistakes and delved even further into the Maher report's fraudulent beginnings. Their investigation and performance together gave the impression that the White House was at ease taking shortcuts. So at ease, in fact, that they didn't even bother to conceal it. The feeling that no one was accepting accountability here was further strengthened by the denials made by purported writers and the discovery of a footnote that didn't exist. Not only was the administration's reputation damaged, it was completely destroyed. Even though the Maher fiasco was absurd, it wasn't the only topic of conversation that day. So another problem was silently lurking in the background while all of this was happening. Wait till you hear Levitt's response to a relatively straightforward query on the Qatari plane. If you thought her handling of fictitious data was poor, there was more than one horrible day. The sequence of hold my drink situations was increasingly perplexing. After the disaster of the Maher report, you would be mistaken to believe that things couldn't get much worse. A straightforward inquiry about a Qatari plane was the next rail disaster on the docket. Levitt just needed to specify whether this plane was a gift or a buy, a basic thing. That's all. Rather, what came next was a remark so convoluted that it may as well have been a riddle. According to Levitt, the Qataris sent the U.S. Air Force a gift transfer from their government to the U.S. Department of Defense. The typical viewer may not be interested in the government's financial language, but when your administration's calculations don't add up, the repercussions are more than just hypothetical. These two talking points, the budget bill and the Qatari jet, don't seem to be connected at first glance, but taken together, they presented a disorganized image of government that is out of sync with itself. They are also very costly and felt by the taxpayers whose wallets are tied to these choices. On the one hand, it's unclear whether overseas transactions constitute purchases or gifts. Conversely, a deliberate rejection of hard data in favor of magical thinking. It was more than simply a communication issue. The issue was one of trust. By the time Leavitt had rambled her way through the jet and financial forecasts, the press had already become doubtful and was returning to their desks with even more pointed questions about who, if anybody, was in charge of the ship. Leavitt was feeding out turmoil by the gallon, if there was such a thing. The simplest way to characterize her communication style that day would be to compare it to attempting to make a cake without a recipe and igniting the kitchen. Each explanation exacerbated the situation. Rather than providing substance, she created uncertainty and then topped it off with contempt. These kinds of moments are more than just poor visuals. These are the kinds of incidents that linger in the minds of people long after press conference is over. They support a narrative of dysfunction that extends beyond Leavitt's answers and encompasses the way the administration responds to questions. By the time she concluded, the conversation was more than just words. She, the White House, and most definitely the people drafting policies while crossing their financial fingers behind their backs. For an administration already dealing with court losses, scrutiny over fabricated reports, and now a math problem that began with $4 trillion, the persistent feeling was that no one really had a plan. At this podium, there was more than just smoke. A blaze was in full force. The pandemonium had already succeeded in solidifying the impression of a White House that was unable to get out of its own way. Even if this news conference might have stopped there, the press conference was more than simply Caroline Leavitt's awful day. It was a clear demonstration of the White House's desperate attempts to prevent chaos. From fabricated health reports to court decisions, each subject exposed a more serious problem. It seemed that no one was in charge, and when they are, they lose control. Everyone is affected. Top economies sway. Unchecked disobedience occurs in courts, and public confidence erodes more quickly than campaign pledges. Chaos doesn't stop at the platform if this catastrophe has taught us anything. Stay tuned, because the next news conference might smash the record if this one was poor.